Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield holding it down for us in the DraftKings studios in Boston. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, the DraftKings YouTube, and more. Jason Fitz, our good buddy from over at Yahoo Sports, down in Houston, going to join us here in the 9 o'clock hour. As Dad, we have a national champion crowned in college football. Congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines. They are your 2024 college football playoff national champions. One of the only, I believe only the fourth team ever to complete the 15-0 run, and the last national champion of the 4-team college football playoff era. And they did it the exact way they have done everything else, Dad, by repeatedly punching the other team in the face over and over until they tap out.
You know, every now and then you get reminded, I don't think every now and then, but you get reminded of how the game was played, right? In just the 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And what everybody said is how Bo Schembechler would be, you know, so happy about this type of victory. A guy, Jim Harbaugh, the coach, played for, and his father, Jack, coached with in Bo Schembechler. So this is the Big Ten way, the Michigan way. And you, as a former offensive lineman, I have to so appreciate the fact that these old linemen just got to plow downhill, a couple of backs getting a couple of touchdowns each, and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. This kind of went how we thought from the Michigan side, control the ball. They held the ball, I think, for maybe not even a minute longer, I think, or it was almost even. But control the drives, the rushing attack, the way they did. But we all thought, boy, but Washington, with their ability to hit big plays, is going to get them on the other end. Mike, this may go to, I know we're in 2024 now, not back in the 80s, but it certainly gives credence to the defense wins championships, because this Michigan defense is absolutely incredible. We'll talk about, and we talked about before this game started, Michigan was the most complete team. They could run the ball incredibly well, throw it good enough, and play unbelievable defense. Now, there was, I had heard a few people talk about, if you look at the top teams in the country against the pass, I think 3 of the top 5 were Big Ten schools. But the thought process being, there's not great passing at times in the Big Ten, so that leads to you having good pass defense. So there were some people that were wondering, is Michigan defense, and especially pass defense, really this good? Or is it because they go against bad passing teams? And we found out they're really this good. And they're going to have to deal with it more of the passing, as everybody in the Big Ten will be, as the Pac-12 comes over, and messes with the Big Ten. We'll have more passing there. But I can't say enough, listen, certainly from that O-line standpoint and rushing attack, but the way that defense played against teams that could run the ball, teams that could pass the ball, teams that could do both, they answered every test. And, before everybody starts with the asterisk and all that, BS on that. Man, enjoy that championship. You were the best team in college football. You were favored to win this game. You won this game handily. You kept waiting and hoping, you were going to get a game, right? You're going to make it 17-10. Washington gets that score before half, and you knew they were getting the ball back in the third quarter, Mike. So I know we were all texting in our groups saying, okay, please, you made it a 1-score game. See what you can do in the beginning of the second half. Let's even it up, and we're back to a 0-0 type of a game. And what does Washington do? They throw an interception.
Yeah, I think that was one of the interesting parts in here is when you look at the box score and you see the gaudy rushing numbers from Michigan, over 300 yards rushing. Donovan Edwards, who had not quite had as explosive a year overall as he did last season, and certainly as of late, looked like he may have been getting some touches taken in the backfield, averaged 17 yards a carry in this game. But that was largely at the beginning, Dad. They started rolling like crazy. They had 200-yard rushers in like the first quarter and a half. And then inexplicably, in my mind, in critical situations, 3rd and 4th downs, went away from the run, opened this game back up to a Washington defense that was glad to accept J.J. McCarthy passing attempts, and then got into the situation where, you get the late score from Washington to end the first half, and you've got the chance to double dip coming out of the second half. But like you said, that Michigan defense found its way back into it, and gave Jim Harbaugh the gift of now being at the big person's table as he talked after the game about the standard in his family and what this moment now means for him. Maybe. Coming here in a second.
For me personally, I can now sit at the big person's table in the family. They won't keep me over there on the little table anymore. My dad, Jack Harbaugh, won a national championship, and my brother won a Super Bowl. So it's good to be at the big person table from now on.
I do love the thought that in the Harbaugh family, they actually made him sit at a different table. Like, we've all gotten to see more Harbaugh family exposure than we've ever seen. Like, seeing his parents at a lot of these games and hearing his mom get interviewed. The bloodlines are very, very apparent in all this. You had the cute moment during the game where John Harbaugh goes down on the sideline and surprises Jim, taps him on the leg, and he pops up and he gives him a big hug. And, Dad, you saw the common Harbaugh trait on display in that physicality, because you mentioned the lines of scrimmage. This was the last 3 winners of the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line. Washington won it this year. Michigan won it the prior 2 years, and clearly took it personally, the challenge of going out here and getting it done in this game. Now, they were going up against a Washington defense that came into this game much maligned, like we talked about. And, Dad, I got to be honest, absolutely gave Washington a chance to win in this game. Washington's defense from the end of the second quarter on into the second half played incredible football. Now, I don't know why it took them so long to do the things that we all thought going into the game would make sense. Load up the box, be aggressive, blitzing linebackers, having your safeties play downhill on early downs to try and force J.J. McCarthy into passing downfield, where, oh, by the way, J.J. McCarthy was 10 of 18 for 140 yards and spent a lot of this game with fewer than 10 completions. So they had the game script in the second half and gave the ball back to their offense over and over and over again. And that's where the disappointing factor, Dad, when we talked about the chief matchup of this game, the Michigan defense, Jesse Minter coordinating that against Washington and Ryan Grubb's offense, that was a decided win for the Michigan defense and what they were able to do with a Washington offense that had plenty of chances.
You know, and to your point, the adjustments made. That's why, while it got out quick for Michigan, I was coming back from Dallas. So between watching it on a plane and listening to it on radio, trying to listen to it or see what adjustments Washington's making, a lot of times you can throw out the first couple of drives because that's kind of we're seeing what they do and we'll make our adjustments. And when Washington wasn't and they kept giving up the yards, I thought, what are we doing here? We got either you're adjusting and Michigan's just continuing to kick your ass, or you're not just adjusting at this point. And they did load the box more, which they should, because dare J.J. McCarthy to have to throw the ball. Right, he's a good thrower. He's not elite, but he's a good thrower. But they have a better running game than a passing game, so make him throw the ball. And they finally did that. You look at J.J. McCarthy. Now, listen, he's 10 of 18. He didn't need to throw it more than 18 times because of the way they were running ball. His 2 biggest plays were a 21-yard run or a 22-yard run on 3rd and 13, I think. It was a great job recognizing coverage, seeing the opening he had, and taking off. And then the one big pass over the middle to Colston Loveland, the tight end, it was a nice pass right on the money over the top, and Loveland, I think, went 41 yards with it when Washington really needed to stop to try and stay in this game. This Washington did finally adjust. They had a chance, as we said, 1 score going into the second half. And, they couldn't close the deal. And, Mike, we know what the story is going to be. All those who jumped on the Michael Penix bandwagon last week and said, wow, look at this guy. And I had said, I've been on him all along. This was an eye-opening thing to say, well, okay. Now he only got sacked once, but he was getting knocked down all the time and getting pressured a lot. But you know what? That's going to happen in the NFL, and you're going to have tight windows in the NFL. And he was clearly affected by the rush, and we'll see what the injury. He was grabbing his ribs. It looked like he had a rib issue, but he was getting knocked all over the place, had his old lineman land on his ankle. He got the hell beat out of him this game. But, Mike, his throws were off. I mean, passes he usually hits, and you're going to have to hit under pressure at the next level. He was off this game, and he was taken off by the Michigan defense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to make sure I give the Michigan defense their just due, because they did a couple of things that to me were different than the last game, and it just in general that I was wrong on. You mentioned the number one. They only sacked him once. I thought they would need to put him down a lot more than that to win this game, but they got to him and they hit him still. And they did it rushing 4 for a majority of the game. Now, Jesse Minter has a lot of NFL in his bag, and so they gave him a ton of different looks, and there were some 5-up looks, and there was a lot of moving and twisting up front that's been pretty part and parcel with what Michigan does all year, and they were able to just line up 4 and get wins, especially over the offensive guards of that Washington team. And we saw Michael Penix Jr. come back down to earth. That was the one thing in the last week, Dad. Like you said, you've watched plenty of Michael Penix. I got to cover him a bunch this year. It didn't always look like the Sugar Bowl. Like, there are reasons he wasn't the consensus number one overall pick in the draft, like he would have been if every game was the Sugar Bowl for Michael Penix. He'd have a Heisman and he'd have the draft status to back that up. But there had been more games that had some of this element where when he was pressured, then some of the throws started to sail a little bit, and you had the bad miss on Rome Odunze, who was wide open in the first half. You had a couple of high balls to Polk, one behind him late, and some of that is certainly indicative of, hey, Michigan's defense is getting pressure that bothers a quarterback. It throws off the timing and rhythm. And then the other part was, Dad, I thought too many pre-snap penalties for this Washington team. Too many mistakes that set them up in bad downs and distances against the Michigan defense that didn't need your help being aggressive, and took away so much of the stinger of Washington's offense that presents all these different looks and shifts and motions that kind of go out the window when it's 3rd and 22 and you can't do all that cute stuff anymore, and you've got to kind of simplify the equation. So as much as Michigan's defense deserves the credit, and I don't want to take anything away from them, that back end, Will Johnson, Mike Sainristil still were incredible. They spent the majority of the night outside of a couple of busts strapping up this really good wide receiver room. Washington's also going to look back and see so many spots where Washington beat Washington in this game, especially offensively.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And Penix will have plenty of time to break down, because we also have to remember that the evaluations that go on, there are doctors who rip your body apart for former past injuries. He's had 4 season-ending injuries when he was at Indiana, both shoulders and both knees. So he's got a lot of scar tissue to deal with as well. I still like him to see what he can do in the NFL. But, and you're right. If every game was like the Sugar Bowl, we'd have been talking about him as the number 1 pick all along. So it obviously has not been. We all know that. But that was not a good look offensively for Washington, for him. And I will give Michigan the credit. One of the places I will, Mike, is while we know Penix in this offense can go downfield, and they did hit one, I believe, to Odunze downfield, but missed too many. They love those short passes. And as much as, and we both call games, you sit there and call games and analyze this and analyze that. As I've said many times, football is still a game on one-on-ones. And those outside passes, you have blockers on DBs, and you're basically set up to have the receiver with the ball in space against one defensive player in space, and who wins the one-on-one. Whether it's those plays, whether it's slants, whether it's passes that are designed to make yards after the catch. And Jesse Minter talked about it, all week, is you've got to, and it's not rocket science, you've got to make the tackle. You'll give up the short throw, but you've got to make the tackle. And we saw him miss an early tackle, and then we saw them, they just clamped down. They were doing an incredible job of coverage, of blanket, of making the tackle right after the reception, where Washington receivers were used to getting a lot of yak, and yards after the catch. And, I didn't want to sound like I'm throwing up. So that is where I credit that Washington defense more than saying the Michigan defense, more than saying the Washington offense didn't do what we normally see. They didn't do it because of Michigan's defense. This was truly the best defense in football, and they showed it. And any questions about can they do it against a passing team, at least for this one game, they damn well answered it.
Yeah, and that's part of the mystery of this Michigan team. I'm not with the people that want to go back and do revisionist history about what Georgia would have done in this spot or anyone else.
Oh, no.
They didn't get there, so they didn't get the opportunity to. What I will say is, with Michigan now, this becomes interesting, and less so because in a 12-team playoff, a lot of this stuff is going to be less relevant, but this is a Michigan team that decided to schedule nothing and no one out of conference for the last couple of years. Get to conference play, know you were basically going to have to win in November, and then charge up for this postseason run. And while we'd like to see people in the sport incentivized to go out here and schedule tough out of conference and give us some of the interesting games, Michigan opted against it, and it's a strategy that worked because you had enough bites at the apple with this core and this roster that was led by J.J. McCarthy, who now finishes up his college career 27-1 as a starter. Wow. This was J.J. McCarthy after the game talking about coming back from last year after their loss in the Fiesta Bowl.
We came a long way, but in order to accomplish things like this, you got to go to those, dark places where everything's not great. And, just the response, the urgency right after that last game last year, it was different. I knew it, just from being on the podium last year and saying that we'll be back. I knew the guys that were coming back, and I had this feeling that it was going to be where we are right now. And, just all credit goes to, the players on this team, everybody in that facility, Coach Harbaugh. Like, that man, he's the reason we're here today. So just all thanks to him and to everybody on the team.
And Dad, like we said, J.J. McCarthy, I struggle with some of his NFL prospects the way other people seem to light up about that guy. I don't see it quite as much. There's great tools there, but that last game last night was a perfect example. In critical moments, J.J. McCarthy, when they turned to him, it was inconsistent. There were some times where it was the receiver. There were some times where it was him. But in general, it was never the driving force behind that team the way the running backs and the offensive line were in that group. But he was a part of a core that decided to come back and do this together. Him, Blake Corum, some of the other guys in the offensive line that had prospects in the NFL in a day and age where we talk so much about the portal, Dad. They were able to keep the core of this team together for a while now and build up to a moment like this in a way that could become more increasingly rare in modern college football.
And it worked, right? The plan worked, because if it doesn't work, there's a lot of guys that are going, man, I came back and we didn't get it. It's like the Rams, making all the moves that they made to get a Super Bowl, and it worked. Because if it didn't work, they'd get slammed for it, and that's that's from an organizational standpoint. We're in college. It's players that could have had been in the league for 1 year already, deciding to come back. I feel bad for Zach Zinner, the right guard who got hurt in that Ohio State game and missed all this, one of the best linemen in the country, and supposedly coming along very well from surgery. Yeah. But, we both know this. The locker rooms are fantastic. And the more guys are together, the tighter a locker room a lot of times can get, especially if you're successful. And they have been successful over the last few years. So the camaraderie and probably the decision for a lot of these players was easy, saying we're right on the doorstep. And this is something we want to appreciate together. We have all been together for so long that we can close this deal out if, we come back and do this for another year. So kudos to them. Because of that type of a core, you have no worries about, is the team preparing themselves? Because that's all they came back for. Because they knew they could do it. So you knew in the off-season workouts, they were all going to do the right thing, and they were going to work out, and they were going to hold each other accountable, and they were going to push, themselves. Something that a lot of times a college coach is supposed to instill in these college players. Michigan had that because of the reason they were all doing this.
And I mean, think about how often we've heard Lane Kiffin and others, people that have led the charge on portaling teams, and it's not to disparage portal players, but they said it's hard to set a culture when you've got new guys coming in who all have varying motivations and different backgrounds. These guys had one thing on their mind coming off of last season, and I can tell you as someone who's lost the big game before, I didn't have another college game to come back and try. I didn't have another season, and I thought about it every day for probably the next year and a half, 2 years. It was never far from your mind. And so for them to go back weaponized with that, with the kind of leadership they had on that team, they went out and were able to execute football's oldest formula, man. For a lot of other teams, and Washington was a great team, but so much of that felt like trigonometry at times, where your angles and things all over the place. Michigan said the fastest way from point A to point C is directly through point B's chest, and they did that and executed that all year long, and they did it in the biggest game. So congratulations to the Wolverines and those players. First national title since 1997 for them. Coming up next, let's speculate about their coach's future.
Back to GoJo and Golic. We are hours removed from Jim Harbaugh winning the college football national championship. So let's speculate about his coaching future. Why not? So according to The Athletic's Mike Sando, the Chargers have emerged as the front runner for Harbaugh. Now, according to Sando, 7 coaches and execs said on Sunday they thought the Chargers made the most sense. They also think the Raiders are likely to make a run as well. So one said they want Harbaugh and he wants them. So I would think they would get that done. The Raiders want Harbaugh too. So the Raiders could outbid them, but I don't think that will happen. But guys, last night, post-game with Scott Van Pelt, it kind of felt like Jim Harbaugh was alluding to a Michigan return.
We're moving spring practice back. We usually start on Valentine's Day, February 14th, because we love football. But this year we're going to move it back. We're going to move it back about a month. That'll be good too. We'll have some nice weather in the spring in Ann Arbor.
Okay, so you're thinking about the spring in Ann Arbor. All right.
Oh,
I say Scott was hip to that one.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Is this just? You know, this is just what you say, right? Like, I think his future's still uncertain here.
I think he's probably gonna leave. Like, I maybe it's just me, and it all seems too perfect, and maybe sometimes when it seems too good to be true, it usually is. And not that I'm rooting for that, but that you look at all the signs here, Dad. Guy goes back to his alma mater, is a Michigan man, helps lead them to their first national championship in the 21st century, does it his way, weathers the tough times in the storm, especially going back to 2020 where it looked like he might be fired. He had to take a pay cut, and now he's all the way back at the mountaintop. But he mentioned it there, and he heard him talk about, he saw his brother. He talked about his brother winning a Super Bowl. We know competition is the love language of that family. And that's what I keep going back to, Dad, for how complicated and mysterious Jim Harbaugh's brain seems to be. I actually think there's one part of it that's pretty easy to understand. The man is wired to seek contact, and I feel like the next level is always something that's going to appeal to him while he feels like he's got meat left on that bone.
Well, he also was at the next level and almost reached the mountaintop, and it was his brother who beat him at the mountaintop when he was a head coach at San Francisco, and he faced his brother. I mean, this family faced his brother in the Super Bowl, but as we said, his dad coached the national championship. His brother won a Super Bowl. He was in a Super Bowl. Now he's a national champ. Mike, I have always said this, and I don't know if there's anyone in sports right now who has a bigger leverage hammer than Jim Harbaugh, right? Because he did not sign the extension at Michigan. So if he were to go back to Michigan, remember, he took a pay cut a few years ago when he was losing to Ohio State. Now those days seem long gone as to what he's done.
I think he made $3 million in incentives on the way to winning this title for a total of like $10 million this year.
And he won't have to worry about incentives to make $10 million if he stays in college. That'll be the deal. So if he wants to come back, and Ward Manuel, the AD there, even said, what pro team wouldn't want this guy to coach? He said, listen, I'm the AD here at Michigan. I want him to coach Michigan football. But he said there's going to be a lot of teams after him. So he knows, I mean, whether the AD or any NFL team is going to just be cringing when they hear from his agent to what the number is going to be, right?
Yep.
So for Harbaugh, man, use it. Whether you're going back to Michigan, whether you're going to the NFL, which I think he'll do, and I think it would be the Chargers, though Dean Spanos, they don't spend the most money in the world, and we know with the Raiders they will throw money at you, but it seems the better setup with a quarterback who's with the Chargers. So obviously there's discussion there, but I think he's going to leave. But if he stays, man, he already is making a lot of money. Listen, the guy's never got to worry about that, but still, that's part of the equation. And it's all right for someone to try and get the most money that they can.
Absolutely. And I think another part of the equation for Jim that we also need to mention, and that is the effect that a looming NCAA sanction might have in all of this for the science-stealing scandal that Jim Harbaugh made it very clear last night. He believes that this is the sound of Jim Harbaugh claiming their innocence after this national title.
We're innocent. And we stood strong and tall because we knew we were innocent. And I just like to point that out. And these guys are innocent. And overcome that. It wasn't that hard because we knew we were innocent. So that's really what I want to say. It went exactly how we wanted it to go. It went exactly how we wanted it to go.
He's dying on the hill.
I will say this. I appreciate the focus of the Michigan players in the midst of all of this. I mean, they didn't have their head coach for 6 games this year.
Yeah.
And they won the national championship. That is pretty wild. And the rest of the staff, like, I think Sharon Moore is a star. Their offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, who stepped in and coached one of the games at the beginning of the season when Harbaugh was suspended. He coached all 3 at the end of the season, and I thought did a masterful job in situations. I thought last night got away from the run a little bit in spots that I was surprised by, but in general, I think is a phenomenal coach. I think if Harbaugh leaves, should absolutely be someone in line to be the next head coach at Michigan, and if not there, somewhere else. But Dad, I really got a little bit tired of the overcoming adversity narrative around this team. The adversity came from one place. The call is from inside the house. You could sit up there and claim their innocence. There's a mountain of evidence that at this point suggests otherwise. And if an NCAA report goes in and finds that they are somehow completely exonerated in a way that, by the way, the Big Ten already felt enough was there to punish and sit him down for 3 games at the end of the season, then I will retract all this statement. But until then, we've got enough Connor the Stallions related weird propaganda to probably say innocent wouldn't be the word I'd use.
That's exactly right. That's not the word. And I don't think he could have said the players on the field were innocent, which they were, because then if he said that, everybody understood the next question would be, well, you said the players were, how about you? So he had to do the all-encompassing, we're innocent, to which, the eye rolling that had to go down. Now, listen, we both, so everybody to know, both Mike and I don't care. Wear the ring proudly, display the trophy. You're national champs. You beat everybody. You did it. So this is in no way saying you don't deserve or there should be an asterisk. BS on that. You're the champs. But, Jim, you guys aren't innocent. And he's going to, I think, go to the NFL, and that's when we use Pete Carroll as a verb. He's going to Pete Carroll it. Right? Pete Carroll, took off from USC when things were starting to go, with the NCAA investigations. He went to Seattle, and he's been unbelievably successful. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying that's what he did. And Jim Harbaugh, that if he's going to, let me put it this way, if he's going to leave, it would be hard-pressed for me to think that part of it wasn't at least a little bit of a reason, Mike, of what may be coming down the road and what has already happened.
Absolutely. I think that's human nature. And I think at this point, you talked about War Manual understands he's always going to be in demand, especially because of his NFL background. They've been used to this. He interviewed for the Vikings job before Kevin O'Connell got that. All these things. At this point, Michigan fans have been numb to it, and I think would feel pretty good about the way Jim Harbaugh left the program, even if he did leave. There's going to be a lot of change. They're going to turn a lot of guys over to the draft next year. A team that developed a bunch of guys that weren't necessarily five-star players might set a draft record this upcoming year. So all that's going to be there, Dad. But I still look at this the way you did there and say that kind of saying everybody's innocent in all this. This absolutely had an effect and will have an effect on the decision.
So goes to the NFL, Mike. I think it was Belichick at $20 million. I think Sean Payton at $18 million or something like that, and then somebody at 15 or something. Over under if he goes to the NFL, $15 million.
Oh, I'll say over. If Ben Johnson's going to get the Panthers to pay him that, I think Jim Harbaugh
he's not getting the
is going to find
to pay
himself
him
north of that.
Yeah, I maybe I set that number too low. Maybe I should have said $18 million over or under.
Yeah, it could be in that range. And at this point, Jim Harbaugh's proven himself worth it at every stop that he's been at along the way. So he gets the credit for all that and goes on. And this is one of those things, Dad, where we talked about this with the Houston Astros and the sign stealing scandal. And while it's not as apples to apples because baseball's so different than football, what happened after? The Astros kept winning with a gigantic microscope on their operation, much the same way this Michigan team. After the sign stealing scandal news came out, they had to go down the toughest stretch of their season with everybody looking and wondering if they were doing that, including in this game, and all they did was went out and keep winning. So they deserve the credit for that. We'll wait on Jim Harbaugh's future and take a look at some other bounce back candidates in the NFL next.
back to GoJo and Golic. It's time for our surreal celebrations presented by Ciroc. Ciroc champions your game day celebration with ultra premium vodka. So the Texans are celebrating after punching their ticket to the postseason for the first time since 2019. They're going to take on a Browns team that also earned their first playoff berth since 2020. They're joined by the Steelers, Rams, Packers, and Lions to make 6 total teams that are playoff bound after missing last year's postseason. So for 33 straight seasons, the league has had at least 4 franchises in the postseason a year after they failed to earn a bid. On the other side, Jags are one of 6 teams who failed to make it back after appearing in last year's postseason. Jacksonville started the season 8-3 and then went on to lose 5 of their final 6 games. Guys, which team, that missed out on this year's postseason do you expect to be celebrating a postseason berth next year?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dad, to try and go the way too early prognostication on this because, as we said, we're used to this kind of shuffling every year, and we swapped in Texans, Steelers, Rams, Packers, Lions, and Browns for Jags, Bengals, Vikings, Chargers, Giants, and Seahawks, and they all happened for different reasons, but I think some of them, Dad, when you look at the crop of teams that are now not going to make the postseason this year, there are some that maybe can point towards things that are a little bit predictive, right? I don't know, Dad. I look at the Cardinals team and the way they finished the season, kind of akin to their division mates in the Rams, who had so much of last year undone by injury, especially to Matthew Stafford being banged up, and got him back healthy this year, and obviously had to hit on a bunch of draft picks. But for the Cardinals, you have the bedrock of, you got Kyler Murray back from the ACL.
Right.
He looked pretty solid down the stretch of the season, seems to be executing that offense very well. Jonathan Gannon is all in on him, and so with that to build on, you have to do the other part of nailing some draft picks, but they're an intriguing team going into next season because it feels like they were able to get the most out of that roster in a year where no one expected much.
And I have to believe right out of the gate, I mean, an area they need help is the number 1 receiver. And this receiving core in the draft is top heavy, not top heavy, has studs at the top and is deep. So they could take care of a couple of things there, but they should. Everybody thinks they would go wide receiver number 1. I like that. And then I look at the 6 teams that didn't make it and maybe who has the best chance of those 6 teams of coming back. And even a lot of this, even teams that haven't made it in a couple of years, and you look to see if they're going to make it going back, right, is you look at the quarterback. So even for all the teams, you just mentioned Arizona, Kyler Murray coming back. The Denver Broncos, we have no idea. It's not going to be Russell Wilson, so we don't know who the quarterback is going to be. Washington, it's not going to be Sam Howell, right? He's not going to be the quarterback. Chicago, very interesting on what goes on there. Listen, if Justin Fields is gone from Chicago, some team's going to get a quarterback, I think, and still grow into a really good quarterback. So we'll see what direction they go. But the 6 that missed it this year after making it, Cincinnati's going to get Joe Burrow back, right?
Yep.
Jacksonville, you got some questions there. There's no doubt about it because, even though Lawrence did get nicked up there, the Chargers, you're going to have
I should say, Dad, Cincinnati is probably the better comp that I was trying to force there for the Los Angeles Rams, a team that had been to the Super Bowl, that's got a bunch of the parts you need and just had their quarterback get injured. That does feel like the one that if you're going to look for a Rams-esque bounce back next year, the Bengals will probably be number 1 on everybody's list for that reason.
Yep. And so you go to the Chargers, and who's going to be their coach? I think a lot of people think if Harbaugh is the coach there, if recency bias of what he just did, if he's the coach there, an offensive guy, that they would have a chance to compete in that division. Giants, Daniel Jones got paid, Daniel Jones got hurt, but you don't think a whole lot of special about that team right now. Seattle, Geno Smith 2 years ago to Geno Smith this year to a backup someone. He got nicked up. We're not sure about that team. And in Minnesota, are you bringing Kirk Cousins back or one of the quarterbacks you have on the roster? Is that going to be your future quarterback or are you going to be going out looking for another quarterback? So I think the easy answer there of the 6 that missed who were in it last year, as you just said, is Cincinnati because of the power that team has and the ability of the quarterback when he's healthy.
Yeah, I think you always are deferential, right? Bengals, Jags, Chargers, all because they've got franchise guys under center there, and I still believe that. about Trevor Lawrence, despite what we saw a lot of this season. There are going to have to be changes made, but those ones to me absolutely are going to be right there because that's where they were this season by and large. I mean, the Jags spent a portion of the middle of this season being talked about as potential contenders for the 1 seed in the AFC before they laid an egg down the stretch. Their quarterback finished the season beat to hell. There's a lot of things that showed up in the picture. The one that is interesting, Dad, that you mentioned in there, too, that maybe doesn't have their future secure, because like you said, Denver has a lot of questions they're going to have to answer. The Vikings have a lot of questions they're going to have to answer, but the Chicago Bears have the most ammunition to do it. Like, if you're looking for a Houston Texans true rise to fame from a team, Chicago has set the foundation on both lines of scrimmage. The Montez Sweat trade certainly went a long way in helping that D-line get solidified. The offensive line, while it took a big step back in that loss against the Packers in Week 18 and did not quite look itself, Darnell Wright, Tevin Jenkins, the way that they've reset that line through the draft a bit's helped. And now you go in armed with, at this point, the first pick, the 9th pick, and Justin Fields potentially as capital, depending on what you want to do with that. They've got the opportunity to, like Houston last year, who drafted the likely offensive rookie of the year in C.J. Stroud. And I saw on Bill Barnwell over at ESPN's list of all pros and award candidates, one of the guys who has a real good chance of winning defensive rookie of the year, and Will Anderson Jr., who a lot of people looked sideways at them for trading up to that third spot in the draft to take there out of Alabama. They managed to get, Will Anderson Jr. was a captain his rookie year. I get it was a young team, but that still speaks volumes about another franchise cornerstone they found. And Chicago walks in with that kind of ammunition where they could, based on the trajectory we saw at the end of the season, be in a spot where they really get a lot better in a hurry.
Yeah, they're going to have the best Christmas presents under the Christmas tree, right? And it's like, what do you do with it? Do you know how to, you get that toy or whatever, do you know how to put it together? It's the coolest thing in the world, but can you assemble it? And that's what they have to do in Chicago. They have to, you have the assets to go out and do just what Houston did. It's still a crapshoot. We get it. You can be graded high and still be a bust. We've seen it over and over again. But you got to give yourself that best chance to say, okay, this is what we graded and this is who we think is going to be the guy or the guys in this case to help turn this around like it worked for Houston. So we'll see. They're on the clock. And either way, if they wanted to keep Justin Fields, they're in for getting more assets, right? Because if they want to keep Justin Fields and trade that top pick, well, hell, they're going to get a ransom for it. And if they want to trade Justin Fields and keep that pick, they're going to get not as much, but they're going to get, something in return, assets in return for Justin Fields. So either way, they're going to add to the war chest.
Yeah, it is a massive, massive spring coming up for that front office in Chicago because you have a chance to reset the entire course of this foundation. You think about, Dad, all the excitement that was there when they drafted Justin Fields, a franchise that had been so devoid of quarterback play for so long is in position to get one of the guys that at that point, Justin Fields was a prospect the way that we talk about Drake May and Caleb Williams as a can't-miss guy, and it obviously hasn't gone that way for any number of reasons, some of which are Justin's fault, some of which are the organization's fault. Right. They got a big chance to right that wrong and try and be one of those teams that makes a, not quite worst to first, but they're picking first in the draft. Like, they weren't that bad. They weren't number one overall bad this year, especially the back half of the season, but they've certainly got an opportunity. So I think of the teams that, weren't in the playoffs last year that we're talking about with ready set options at quarterback, they to me remain the most intriguing and honestly, Dad, control so many of the dominoes that are going to fall in the spring for the draft.
Yeah, they really do. So, and again, what happened in Houston makes owners' eyes get bigger than they should be. Mm-hmm. They will say to their GMs and coaches, if we need a quarterback and we pick one high, see what they did? We have to make that happen. When what happened in Houston, everybody needs to remember, is an exception, not a rule. When you're starting with a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback and the such, this normally doesn't happen. So that's even more of a tip of the cap to Houston.
I was going to say, by the way, give DeMeco Ryans his flowers, hopefully creating more opportunities for defensive head coaches, minority head coaches with the success that he's had.
Welcome back, everybody. We love our food here on GoJo and Golic. This is actually a real baby, not a food baby, but it could be a food baby as well. So it's time for another segment of Tums and Yums. That's right. We highlight our favorite food-related stories in sports. It's sponsored by Tums. With Tums Fast Heartburn Relief, your favorite foods are never a gamble. Tums also very handy during pregnancy. Now, our food and sports crossover this week is courtesy of the Buffalo Bills, because the key to their late season success has been identified, and fellas, it's pizza. That is good news for all of us. The team is 4-0 this year following pizza parties hosted by Connor McGovern. So that's right, Bills guard loves to make pizza. Apparently he got into it during COVID, frequently held parties for his teammates during his time in Dallas. He recently started the tradition back up in Buffalo, and the team has gone undefeated since said pizza parties have come into inception. So whatever's in those pizzas is obviously working. Bills are rolling into the playoffs. I'd imagine he's hosting another one of these pizza parties before they take on the Steelers on Saturday. So fellas, what do we think about the power of pizza?
Yes, he did. Everyone wants to make it that the Buffalo Bills are, I believe, 5-0 since the resurfaced story of Sean McDermott's 9/11 speech went viral. But no. This is about the power of pizza and one man opening himself up. Connor McGovern started this during the pandemic, like a lot of us, when he was home by himself, and then mustered up the courage to show his friends his new skill, and now they're all better for it. What's better? I mean, one of my favorite things about playing, in all seriousness, was Thursday night dinners with the offensive line, where you get everybody together. You get to sit there and unload and talk a little bit about stuff that's not the game and have that kind of community and fellowship. And now he takes requests. He's done calzones. He does different kinds of pizzas for guys. The man is an absolute pioneer, and I am so pumped for him.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Thursday night clubs. I mean, they're the best. But then when you do something different like this, like he has a pizza party and they continue to win, it's kind of like that fan that sits with his legs crossed or her legs crossed a certain way, and something good happens and they stay that way because something good happens and they think their legs being crossed a certain way was the reason for it. Listen, players are superstitious as well. If we do something and we win, you know what, we're going to do it again. And then we're going to do it again. And that's what they're doing with Connor McGovern and enjoying pizza along the way. So what's better than that? We're eating good pizza. I'd imagine a few pops are involved as well. So how great that is. And as we said, camaraderie in sports in a locker room or at a house, whatever, is just one of the coolest things.
Cooking for other people when you haven't done it before is a very daunting task. That is a brave thing that Connor did with his big burly brothers. And now I can only hope that there is some crew for one of the networks covering these games that's going to go out there and do the feature piece we all deserve, where they go to the Buffalo Bills offensive line pizza party and get one of the pizzas made by Connor McGovern. This, I pray for our nation. Dad, if pizza helped heal and solidify the Buffalo Bills, maybe they need to send some to the folks down near MetLife with the New York Jets, because it seems like there's a lot of heartburn around there right now. Aaron Rodgers yesterday was taking some questions in response to the Jets season. He got asked about if he had words of advice for the organization going into 2024, to which he responded, "Flush the BS." He got a question about what he learned from the 7-10 season, and he said, quote, "Anything in this building that we're doing individually or collectively that has nothing to do with real winning needs to be assessed. If you want to be a winning organization and put yourself in position to win a championship and be competitive, everything you do matters. All the BS that has nothing to do with winning needs to get out of the building." So that'll be the focus moving forward, and that's the focus of these exit interviews. This comes, and there was I believe Rich Cimini was tweeting out a lot of these updates, great Jets reporter, and that came right after the update that Aaron Rodgers does not plan to address the backlash to his comments about Jimmy Kimmel, and that you can tune into the Pat McAfee show today for those. Like, it's got to be a bit at this point, Dad. That's the only thing that I can come up with.
Or, just go do it where you've been doing it all along, being on with Pat every week. I mean, that's been obviously a big thing for them. But everybody wondered what would happen when you're not talking about football anymore. And boy, oh boy, what a turn it took with the Jimmy Kimmel situation that, obviously is Tuesday. Is going to be, today's the day that he's going to talk about. It'll be interesting what he has to say because of what he said about a man in Jimmy Kimmel, which would tick anybody off. So it will be interesting. So he continues to be in the news.
But I guess that's the point, is how you come out and say we need to flush all of the stuff that has nothing to do with winning, and yet every Tuesday, this is what's going on. We're all trying to find the guy who did this meme. I mean, for God's sakes, Aaron's smart enough to know and see that.
Yeah, Aaron is, but Aaron is very sure about himself, right? Very sure about himself. On topics, whether they're sports or whether they're not sports. As he has said many times, he does a lot of research, take that however you want to take it. But he thinks he is, has some knowledge on other situations, and he's not afraid to spout it out. Which I'm sure to him, Mike, he can separate church and state, saying I'm talking about these things that have nothing to do with football when he talks about things outside the world of sports. And then there's the talk about football. So I think in his mind, he's separating those two and saying this one has nothing to do with the other. When I'm talking about football or when I'm in that building, it is football 100%. And when I'm outside that building, he obviously has other things he likes to talk about.
And you know what the thing is like, I don't want to overstate this too much, because we saw on Hard Knocks, we heard from a lot of those guys in the team, like Aaron Rodgers, when he's in the building for them, is a net positive. Like Aaron Rodgers came in and you saw the way that those guys' eyes lit up when they saw what he did on the field, what he meant to them in meeting rooms, the benefit of having his level of football accomplishment and experience around an organization that's been totally bereft of that for God knows how long. Like, Aaron Rodgers is absolutely a part of winning football when he's inside the organization. I just found it quite frankly hilarious that he talked about distractions and anything that doesn't have to do with winning, when the only reason the Jets got talked about for the back half of the season was either something he said to this vein on that show or the quest for him to return back from the Achilles injury that was impressive in the pursuit, even if it was never realistic in the execution.
Well, you're right, and we talk about this all the time. What you say then makes others have to answer questions about what you say. So you're writing a check that sometimes others have to cash. And, but he's been doing this a long time, though, and I don't see him changing. I don't see him be the one that may change in this, because I don't think he believes he's doing anything like that. I think, like I said, he can separate that, while on the outside looking in, we have an opinion that they could be meshed together somehow, and he doesn't. But the bottom line is, you're right. They're a better team with him, not only in the locker room, but certainly on the field. And he says, he kind of gave the inference that it's not one more year. He wants to keep playing after that. I think he has 2 more years on his deal as well. So this whole situation with him and the Jets, if you didn't cry if you're a Jet fan, you have to laugh. Because all that's made out of Aaron Rodgers coming to that team, and even people like Stu Gatz, who, if you're a Jets fan, the glass is cracked. It's not half full. You're waiting for the shoe to drop. The shoe dropped 4 plays in. The shoe dropped. They didn't even get off to a good start to where, they're 3-1. Look at them go, oh my God, he got hurt. Or, they're 7-4. Oh, he got hurt. 4 plays into the season, it's over. So the basically everything changes now. Everything from conversations on a weekly show he's doing isn't about the upcoming game as much as about his situation that he's in that he was in then.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we should say all this. The football stuff, to me, we're talking about this so largely separate. I am fascinated to see what he does say today on Pat's show, and if he will have the humility to apologize for what I think was a pretty brazen and irresponsible insinuation that he made about Jimmy Kimmel, especially all falling under the Disney umbrella there. But even just on a human level.
Yeah. That I mean, you just can't say that unless you have absolute proof, actually accuse or say someone was involved in something that involves pedophilia. I mean, it's awful. And, man, if you are going to spout that out publicly and have no proof on that, then, whatever's coming back your way, you're going to deserve. So I agree. I'll be interested to hear what he has to say today.
And the fact that the last 2 sentences are things that we had to utter in relation to one of the best quarterbacks of my lifetime is a wild testament to how far off the road that we've gone entering 2024.
GoJo and Golic. Let's circle back to the College Football National Championship to start hour 2 here. Both teams entered last night undefeated, but only Michigan walks away 15-0 with their first national title since 1997. Pac-12 champion Huskies got a taste of what they'll be up against next season as well, with the team moving to the Big Ten. So despite the lopsided final score, head coach Kalen DeBoer believes his team proved that they belonged.
I know what the score looks like, but I feel like that fine line was right there again tonight, and we weren't that far off. There's not a doubt in my mind that we have a good enough football team to go out there and win a national championship, and just got to make a play here and there, get us over the hump, and it could have been a different outcome.
All right, so the guys are standing by with Jason Fitz, who was there, who took it all in person, who's actually, I think, still there taking it all in person.
Yes, I can say Yahoo Sports football host and Fox Sports radio host Jason Fitz hanging out down in Houston. He was live on the scene last night for all of that. And Jason, I actually agree with Kalen DeBoer and his assessment there. This was a close game. They responded to the early punches from Michigan in the first quarter and had this as a one-score game, really, until the massive swing surrounding, I think, two of the most egregious officiating calls of the entire game. But still, credit to Michigan. They get the job done. You were there, Jason. What was that atmosphere like in person with these two fan bases and teams that hadn't been to the stage in a long time?
You and I have been lucky enough to cover this together for years, right? And I never take it for granted. When you're on the sideline of the national championship every year, it's sort of my favorite event. I was really stunned early on at the emotion you could feel from both, not just the teams, the fans. I mean, it is rare that you have what feels like truly a 50-50 split in the stadium. It's rare when you see sort of that level of electric energy from everybody. I think because these are two fan bases that haven't been there for so long, it was, you could feel that. You could feel the angst from Washington fans as the game wore on. You could feel the dominance from Michigan fans. Like, there was a different energy for sure in that stadium last night. Absolutely.
And as far as the Washington side, the thought process or the feeling maybe you saw or you felt there by things that used to work for them, right? It was Michigan overall, we all thought was a better team, but Washington has the ability to get back in this game quickly. And they just weren't. So whether it was from their side or how good Michigan was playing defense on the other side, they seemed to be in an area they weren't used to.
Yeah, but there was this moment, and I think this is, Mike and I, Junior and I were texting about this at one point. Michael Penix Jr. was just a little off the entire time. And I can't stress that enough, because if you look the end of the first drive, there's the opportunity to catch Odunze in the back of the end zone. Could have been a touchdown. He misses that throw. Later in the game, Odunze wide open on a deep ball that he thinks is cutting out. Odunze cuts in. He misses that. There was a throw down the sideline that it looked like he could have gotten the receiver. Everything was just a little off from Michael Penix Jr. And that was the big difference in this game, because last week everything was spot on. Like, he was hot. This week he was not. And that's a huge difference here. It feels like the first time you go to the craps table, you make a bunch of money and you say, I'm going to do this every week. This second time he goes to the craps table, he's like, it's not that easy. It just felt like that was what we were watching.
Well, okay, you say he was off, but this is me as a former defensive player. I don't feel like you're giving him being off to he was off because of the Michigan defense maybe enough credit.
Well, I mean, look at that first pass to Odunze. He climbs right past the defenders like he's good. He walks up the pocket. He's got the guy wide open. Like, that ain't good defense. That's just Michael Penix Jr. floating a football. The second one where Odunze's out there having like a nice little s'mores campfire in the back, like he was wide open to get to the end zone. That ain't good defense. That's just better to be lucky than good.
To Fitz's point, and really, I think the frustration, if you're a Washington fan, is this game is, by and large, now at the end of the game, they were teeing off. You had Washington in some real adverse drop-back situations. They couldn't do a lot of their normal stuff. Michigan's defensive line was tattooing that dude to the point where he's holding his ribs. He's probably got stuff leaking out of there, for God's sake. But for the majority of that game, it was a lot of the same pressure that we saw against Texas. Like, Texas was in the backfield. Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat were harassing him all day, and he was able to step up and make the plays that he was not able to make it in this game. So that's why it feels like he was off. But again, I stress this to everybody who was, accusing people of not watching Washington throughout the season just because they watched the Sugar Bowl and really liked the player. Like, that Washington Michael Penix Jr. that showed up in the Sugar Bowl wasn't necessarily the guy that was there down in and down out for every game of the regular season, and we saw a little bit of that coming back down to earth in that game. And Fitz, I know for you were the one thing you were texting me about was your selfish interests about your beloved Las Vegas Raiders during this game, because you watch this with the eye, like a lot of people do, fans of the next level who want to see, hey, are any of these quarterbacks that people were talking about for my team actually worth it? You got to see J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. both in person, guys who both I think are going to be an interesting eval at the next level. What was your big takeaway with those guys?
It's interesting because I think the biggest takeaway came at media days and the opportunities that I had to talk to both of them. Right, like Penix feels like the type of kid, and when you talk to him, I spent some good time with both of them at media days, on the podium and off the podium. And when you talk to Penix, he seems like the type of kid that maybe he's not as polished, maybe he doesn't think as much about some of the questions, but he's super relatable. And you could even see his teammates, just like he sort of has that vibe everybody goes around. And when you watch the game, you can feel that. And JJ is totally the exact opposite. Like he's a program machine, right? But he spent so much time talking to one of our buddies that works for the Pac-12 network about how he just focuses on the tip of his nose, and that's how he breathes and all these things. And I kept looking at it thinking, like, he's just a peculiar, different dude, right? But even when you watch the game, what you saw was Michael Penix Jr. is just sort of like, he's trying to figure it out. When you see J.J. McCarthy, it's like robot. There's a real mechanism to the way he does everything. I don't know what to make of JJ. He threw the ball 10 times, right? Like he completed 10 passes. Like I have no idea. I asked Harbaugh flat out, he keeps telling us all that he's the next Brady and he's better than Brady. If that's the case, why don't you let him cook more? And Harbaugh, like the professional figure skater he is, danced right around that question. So I still don't have an answer to it. Like I don't think we can evaluate JJ McCarthy because I have no idea how often can he actually throw the football to win a game? I don't know.
He danced out of that the way that Jim Harbaugh dodged the first Gatorade cooler attempt. Did you guys see that, by the way? That was jackrabbit speed on that first one. I was really impressed.
Great job. But he got nailed. He got nailed a little bit later. He got fully engaged a little bit later. Yeah.
You will appreciate the fact this is very true behind the scenes, like inside baseball story at the beginning of media days. We're all standing right outside of Harbaugh's podium. I am up against it. Like I am. I actually joked that I never could have gotten that close without Mike Golic Jr. Usually he has to but I got there early. I was ready with my slew of questions. Heather Dinich, the true professional, walks up and there were like 30 of us standing around Harbaugh. And we all look at Heather and she just looks at all of us for the first question. She says, "Don't worry, guys. I got it." Because we knew she was the one that was going to ask about the future. She asked about the future, and you don't usually get a follow-up question. He danced around it. Oh no, Heather got a follow-up question, and her follow-up question, I can't even do it justice, was so perfectly worded on hey, Michigan's told you what they want. What have you told? She did not give him an out, and that's where the big quote, "I just hope I have a future," came from, because she boxed him into a corner. I just looked at it, and I had my phone out with all my questions. I was like, none of these are Dinich worthy. None of them. She's a total pro. None.
She
Heather's
is
beast, man. Love
incredible.
Heather.
Absolutely incredible. So let me ask you this. Next year, basically the whole Pac-12, save for what? Stanford and Cal are going to the Big Ten. Who does the Big Ten struggle more with the Pac-12 style of play, or is the Pac-12 going to struggle more with the Big Ten style of play overall?
I still think the Big Ten is going to dominate the Pac-12 in ways that they're not used to. There's a size difference in some places that seems to make a big difference, right? And there's a recruiting difference that seems to make a big difference. I think when we're talking, I'm talking specifically about the Ohio State, Michigans of the world. I think if you're Wisconsin, guess what? You are now a 7th place team year in and year out. Congratulations. Hope you like this expansion. If you're Nebraska, congratulations. You're basically Vandy. You're going to be irrelevant, and every once in a while you're going to make a bowl game. But if we're talking about the Ohio States and the Michigans, I just think the Ohio States and the Michigans are built different from speed and from size still to where, and remember, even Washington, as great as this story is, it's a bunch of transfers. We still don't know exactly Kalen DeBoer, how he's going to consistently do this over and over and over again. I think the difference for some of the big bigs of the Big Ten isn't just size and speed. It's that they're a factory in being able to recruit and get transfers.
Mike, let me ask you, is it fair to say, though, that this, just for what you and I talked about before, is this Michigan championship team an outlier because of the way they're built? in the transfer portal world we live in, we talked about it. These guys had a lot of guys come back. They had a core group that grew together over the years. So is this more the exception than the rule of how it's going to be?
I'll push back on actually Jason's characterization of the Washington team a little bit. There's a strong core group of these guys that have been here since, I believe, the last Rose Bowl appearance or something near that for this Washington team that basically had seen an incredible season, a lot of the bad seasons, coaching changes in between that had stuck through this. There were a lot of guys that were holdover from the prior staff. Now, you had a couple of guys that were transfers, but like Jalen Polk's a perfect example. He transferred under a prior regime. He had been there since DeBoer stepped on campus. Michael Penix Jr. obviously came over and has the background with DeBoer, but in general, I think both of these teams in some way are a testament to it. I think we see this across the top of a lot of college football where the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Michigans and Ohio States, a lot of it's still the bedrock of guys you recruit. And then the guys that you bring in the portal outside of maybe quarterback are like garnishes. You're filling specific needs. You're not having it be the mainstay of your diet the way a team like Ole Miss's or LSU and USC had to be at the beginning when they were trying to jumpstart a program. Now, I think you're right about the styles make fights portion of this. And I think it's funny because the reason I think Michigan's gotten over on Ohio State lately is because Ohio State deviated from what had been the usual Big Ten prescription. Michigan won playing the most stereotypical Big Ten football I can remember. This was when conferences really used to have those staunch regional identities, and Ohio State had transcended and started playing national level football where they said, we're going to play the beautiful game, Hoga Bonita, and Michigan said, we're going to play the game that punches you in the face. And now a team like Oregon coming in, I think is much more in line to play that style of game because of the way they've recruited and built in the trenches over the last couple administrations there. But there are absolutely teams like Washington where it's going to be an interesting fit.
Yeah, and by the way, the Oregon comp here, I mean, Dan Lanning, right? Like guys that come from SEC backgrounds, I think see some football differently. I do think that's key. The number that sticks out to me with DeBoer, I think there were 4 guys on this Washington team that he was actually responsible for recruiting and bringing in. So like that to me is just when I see that, I wonder, it's a very different comp, but it takes a little bit of a chef's kiss here to make this happen year in and year out. It's the thing that doomed Mel Tucker, right? Like he went to the transfer portal and it worked once and then everything just sort of went to where for Michigan State. So I think you're sort of rolling the dice with that every year.
So, Jason, let me ask you this. In moving forward, Harbaugh was asked it, so I'll ask you. You are a Raiders fanatic. The Raiders are one of a handful of teams that, and there may be more, we'll see what the Belichick situation is, that are in need of a head coach. So I'm giving you the choice. A, Antonio Pierce. B, Mark Davis money whip Jim Harbaugh to get him there. Or C, none of the above.
God, that is so tough. I'd probably, man, I don't know. Like, I think I'm so jaded I got to answer your question. I'm trying to Harbaugh it, tap dance around it. In that exact scenario, I still think I take Antonio Pierce. I take Antonio Pierce because I think I'm just tired of resetting in general. And I said this yesterday to somebody. The Raiders have gotten it wrong so many times. I don't think anybody's going to get it wrong when they get Harbaugh. I just don't know how long you get Harbaugh for. We all know that, right? So, like, there's a part of my mind that says I would love to be good for a few years, but I experienced that with the first Gruden administration, and then I had 20 years of suck after that, right? There's a part of me that watches what I've seen from Antonio Pierce, and I think this guy just, like, there's a difference here. And it's not about the whole he chants Raiders thing. I don't really care about that. It's about the way the locker room has gone to him and really flocked to him. I think that there's something to that, so maybe it's just that I'm wounded from years of bad coaching hires and years of bad quarterbacks. But at this point, I want a little stability from somebody that I think I can look at and say, I can root for this guy. The players can root for it. But I will give you guys this very hot take. I don't think Harbaugh's leaving. Everybody else thinks Harbaugh's leaving. I think he hired Don Yee to go get more leverage and more money. The reports that I got here repeatedly was that he's reached out to staff to sort of be ready to build his professional staff. But also, he's done that 3 years in a row. So nobody seems to know. The reports I got here that the college guys on his staff are just all sort of, yeah, we're used to it. But the biggest thing to me is everybody keeps saying that he's got a 10-year deal on the table for between the $115 and $140 million, depending on who you believe. I believe that number is going to go up. I believe that number is going to get to the high end. And then all of a sudden, you got a choice. You're taking a 6-year deal from the Raiders, even if you're taking a 6-year deal at $15 million a year, which would be huge going rate NFL money. That's $75 million. Like, are you going to leave Ann Arbor with your 732 kids and for $150 million and then go to Vegas for half that? I just, because coaching contracts are fully guaranteed, I think he's going to get the biggest deal he possibly can get. And I don't think because of the number of years, anybody will pay him more than Michigan. So I think he's leveraging all of us.
Real quick, Jason, if he signed a 6-year deal for $15 million, that's $90 million, not $75.
Okay, 90.
Just, you know,
90.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm pretty not smart. I'm pretty not smart.
You didn't think you were going to get mental math past my dad wrong like that, do you? Come on.
Look, there's certain things we know. We know he's going to correct me on the math. We know that his air filters are cleaner than mine. Like, there are things that we know about Senior that keep us all, you know. I digress. So $90 million instead of 150.
It is interesting, Jason, what you laid out there. I think is going to tell us a lot about what is motivating Jim Harbaugh at this point in his career. Because you mentioned the fear of him not being there long. Jim Harbaugh's been at Michigan for a while now. Like, we know he did a lot of the hopping before, but it does seem like a guy who settled in here a lot more, stuck around and weathered the first time they wanted to get rid of him. And now, albeit, Jason, I'm curious from this factor. Dad and I talked about it a lot before. The sign stealing scandal was ever present during the discussion of the season. When you were down there, how did that factor into the discussion about Harbaugh's future and what may or may not be coming down the pipes from the NCAA?
Everybody's talking about that behind the scenes. And what's interesting is we have to remember two portions of it. The NCAA still hasn't ruled on the COVID recruiting violations. Remember that Michigan self-imposed 4 games, then 3 games, and the NCAA said, no, good sir, that is not enough. But we still haven't heard what they think is enough. And they haven't ruled on the sign stealing at all. I had one insider tell me they think it could be as much as a 1-year suspension. But here's the thing that really hit me. Watching the Michigan kids, talking to the Michigan kids, man, it truly galvanized this team. And they truly don't believe they or Harbaugh have done a single thing that is wrong at all. And it's really made him more of a god to everybody around the program. So, like, somehow, some way, and it hit me coming in. I sat down because of our friendship. Honestly, I'm biased to these things. I sat down with the fat guys on both teams, right? I sat down with the offensive line. They were all on bleachers. I sat down with the offensive line for Washington. I asked them all sorts of disrespect questions. Nobody's paying attention. They gave me the same, like, man, you know what? It's us versus us. We don't worry about anything else. We got each other. We just handle each other. I asked Michigan, it's, how do you guys feel given everything that went on? And I got passionate. It is Michigan against the world. They tried to take our coach from us on a plane to Penn State. We are here to show the world that they have wronged us all the way across the world. Like, I had fat dudes that are huge that were angry at me for asking the question in Michigan. And I just think there is this moment, like, we from the outside say, oh, what's it mean? The team looked around and they said, you tried to take our king. And, like, I don't know if I have a God complex. I love the way that turned me into a martyr.
Did you pee your pants when they got mad at you?
I was just going to ask.
No, I didn't pee my pants, but you guys know me well enough. I'm a little goofy, right? So my intro to these things, the more uncomfortable I am too, I'm particularly goofy. So I'm walking up to a riser full of a bunch of fat guys. I walk up to the Washington riser and I'm like, hey guys, let's do this. I got a mic, you know me. And the Washington guys were all in. They huddle up. They're like, this is great. I walk up to the Michigan guys. I'm like, what's up, guys? I'm with Yahoo. I want to get you guys from media days. Like, they left. They literally left. Like, they just dispersed. So I was standing there. I was like, no, seriously, like, come here. And I had to, like, go up to each little group and be like, can you guys sit down here? And would you, like, they were not into it at all. They were not into it at all. They did not want my tomfoolery.
I am amazed that you survived media day without getting stuffed into a locker by the Michigan offensive line. Honestly, one of your more impressive accomplishments, Jason. Everyone, you can check out all of the great content that Jason did over at Yahoo Sports. You can listen to him on the weekends on Fox Sports Radio. Fitzy, travel safe. Try not to get beat up by any linemen on the way out of Houston, okay?
I need a shirt next year that says honorary fat guy.
There you go. Don't give anybody a hug.
Good conscience, I can give you that shirt based on your actions.
back to GoJo and Golic. Huge bummer coming your way, guys. John Morant done for the season. So Morant suffered I can't say this word, he did something to
subluxation.
He did something to his right shoulder during a training session on Saturday. It's going to require season-ending surgery. Morant expected to be fully recovered for the 2024-2025 season, but this, of course, guys, coming on the heels of Morant basically just returning from that 25-game suspension, for conduct detrimental to the league. So with him out, the Grizzlies went 6-3. They went 6-3 with him in the lineup, matching Memphis's win total during that entire 25-game suspension that he served to begin the season. He was averaging 25-ish points, 8 assists in his 9 games this season. So obviously, as you can see from the stats here, incredible boost to the Grizzlies. And this is a huge blow to us who just love watching this guy play basketball.
It is a real shame getting him back at this point, and we were going to have all the wonders about John Morant and his progress from some of the stuff that had happened off the court for him. But on the court, we were so excited to see every bit of the player that we knew we were getting back come back. Now, Jesse, you tripped over the word. My father, unlike Aaron Rodgers, might actually have a PhD when it comes to injuries related to the shoulder. As Dad, you've got 2 shoulders that bear the scars to prove that. So what exactly went on here with Ja Morant in terms of that?
Again, the subluxation means it pops in and out. I had that happen to me before I had reconstructive surgery on my rotator cuff, where it would slide a little more. You have to get like a harness to try and keep it in, or it would slide out on you. And, I was, again, as a D lineman in a position where I couldn't raise my arm because of a brace you had on and a needle, I was able to play. When you're an elite athlete like Ja Morant, and it's a labrum tear, it's different than what I had. Obviously, that needs to be repaired. The way medicine is now, surgeries are now, rehab is now, we should be fine coming back. The issue is always, and at least it was for me, and if you're in a sport, when you get something gets worked on, the last resort obviously is surgery. But when you get opened up and they go inside and do something, the normal thing is, for the normal person, you hurt yourself, you get operated on, you don't do that activity anymore. You don't do that anymore. He's going to continue to play basketball, like guys who get hurt continue to have surgery, continue to play football. So you get scar tissue. The scar tissue tears off. You get floaters. You get surgeries after the season. We'd line up in January for what we called oil changes, because any surgeries you had little floaters of the scar tissue. They'd suck them out with a scope and you'd be ready to go. So that's the one thing you worry about long term, is you're abusing that place that got injured by going out and continuing to play that same sport. But this guy is a young stud. He's a great athlete. I mean, he's young. He's will heal fine from this thing. It's just been an incredibly tumultuous first year of a 5-year, $197 million deal. They just signed him to that. And in his first year, he gets suspended for 25 games, comes back for 9, averages, 28 points a game, and then, has shoulder surgery. So this is not gone the way Memphis or Ja Morant has thought this thing was going to go.
No, certainly not. And to the point you made about the ever-present threat of re-injury or the complications from this, if you're weighing the positives, if you're the Grizzlies, there's enough time to where he's expected to be fully ready to go for the 2024-25 season. You can take the time and rehab this the absolute right way and do this the safest way possible. And he's now the second star player they've lost. Steven Adams also lost before this for the season due to injury as well. So the Memphis Grizzlies are going to be put on the back burner for the rest of this NBA season. Dad, the one thing that popped into my mind that I did worry about, and we always talk about this, when a player gets hurt, it's like you're on a different team. You're still in the building, but you're on a completely different cadence than the normal schedule. And it might be different for basketball where it's a more intimate roster. But my immediate concern coming off of this was, all right, what is Ja Morant going to do with all the added free time on his plate now? We're talking about a guy that had, I think we can label it broadly as some maturity issues in dealing with certain situations surrounding conflict. And now being back around basketball, people always sell the structure of that, but really it's you don't have much time for anything else when you're playing as many games and have as many responsibilities as they do during the season. I do worry a little bit about Ja Morant and now this test of, all right, you're going to have a lot of time on your own now away from the team.
the one thing, and every situation is different, but for the most part when you're suspended, and I'm not going to lie, I don't know in the John Morant situation, when you're suspended, you're not allowed to be in the facility, around the team. And I do not know in this situation, because sometimes, the team or somebody will petition and say, listen, especially if it's an issue outside of, your field, they will say, suspend them, fine, but they're better off being around their teammates and having that structure. And I'll say again, I don't know in the John Morant situation if he was not able to be in the building. My point is, he'll be able to be around here. You're getting surgery, you're rehabbing, he'll be there every day rehabbing, so he'll be around the team, and I'm sure they'll keep him around the team and have him travel with the team once he can from the surgery and be in that structure, because, Mike, what you said, listen, if we're saying it, they know it, right? I mean, they know that's where he's had some of his issues. So as any coach out there in any sport, in any team sport will say, idle time is the devil time. They just pray they don't get that phone call, when players aren't in the facility, and that they act right outside of the facility, but because you want the structure. So he'll be able to still be in that structure. But to your point, you are a ghost when you are hurt, when you are not part of that team, when you're not part of the structure on the court, but still in the building, but not on the court. So we'll see, because he has said all the right things about coming back. But as we know, he's had a few incidents. So talk, the old adage of talk is cheap is very true here. It's now his actions will be magnified because he doesn't have, those games to get ready for.
Exactly. So, listen, we wish him well in the recovery. Like we've all said, we were so excited to get Ja, the basketball player, back. And we hope that next season we can get to that uninterrupted without any more of these disturbances. Jesse, we do need to probably do a quick Lakers check-in here, since it's LeBron James and we're all required by law to mention anytime he says something wild. And they got off the schneid a little bit.
Oh, man, the Lakers, they have a pulse, okay? So they were able to snap that 4-game skid with a 106-103 win on Sunday over the Clippers, providing sort of a sigh of relief, right, for a team that's been in a bit of a tailspin lately. Now, LeBron said it still doesn't take away from the fact that we've been playing like the last 11, 12 games. Tonight was a good start. Hopefully we can start from here and continue to build. Not that I need to remind you guys, but LA is 4-10 since winning the in-season tournament coming into Sunday. That in-season tournament slump, man. So they're hosting the Raptors tonight. But the question I want to know, is Darvin Ham's seat getting hot here? This is not, a great look, but it's also, this kind of happens in basketball season's long. You get slumps. So what do you guys think?
It does kind of happen, but coaches also get fired for far less, especially when they're playing in and around the pressure cooker that is LeBron James' world, Dad. We saw the reports from Shams last week about that. I wouldn't be surprised if this kept up, because unfortunately, NBA coaches get discarded pretty frequently outside of very few elite ones.
Well, they do, and sometimes what do you look for toward the end of the season? You look for a change, a spark, they'll say. And will they feel if the Lakers hang where they are? Right now they're in the 10th slot by a half a game over Utah, to play into the playoffs. And two of the teams we talk about a lot, the Lakers are in the 10th slot and Golden State's outside of that in the 12th slot. So two teams that are struggling right now. So do you make a change at some point to say maybe this will spark us, or the change will put us in the right direction? Quick aside, Mike, we wondered, and it started out poorly when James Harden, pouting to try and get his way everywhere, got to the Clippers with a bunch of older players, and we're like, what are they going to do? And they weren't doing well. Well, they are doing well. They're sitting in the 4 slot now, just 2.5 off the top of the Western Conference at 23-13. So right now, those 30-something guys are getting it done.
We need to form a prayer circle around this Los Angeles Clippers team to protect them from injury, because we know, much like their counterparts in the Chargers in Los Angeles, that's been the boogeyman, especially over this current iteration of the roster. And I would love to see how high this thing can fly. Ever since Paul George and Kawhi Leonard got together, and now with the addition of James Harden, that's all we bleeping want.
back to GoJo and Golic. We are continuing our NBA talk with Draymond Green returning from his suspension. He's back, baby. The NBA reinstated Draymond on Saturday from a suspension that lasted 12 games. Here's what the league had to say. Green completed steps that demonstrated his commitment to conforming his conduct to standards expected of NBA players. He has engaged in meetings with a counselor and has met jointly on multiple occasions with representatives of the NBA, the Warriors, and the National Basketball Players Association, both of which will continue throughout the season. Guys, on the latest episode of Draymond's podcast, he talked about his time serving the suspension and a specific convo that he had with Adam Silver.
I had a conversation with Adam Silver, commissioner of our league. And I just told him, Adam, it's too much for me. Like, it's too much. Like, this is too much. It's all becoming too much for me. And I'm going to retire. And Adam said, you're making a very rash decision. And I won't let you do that.
It's like, it is again, and we've used it many times today, but we're all trying to find the guy who did this meme again. It's like, what do you mean it's all too much? You did this. And now what, you had to have a couple meetings? Like, oh no, it's so much, I'm gonna retire. I can't sit in a room and have these meetings. Like, what is he talking about?
I don't know how many people watched it, believed that part happened with the exact tone and cadence that Draymond laid out there. I will say, Dad, I watched a fair amount of his video on the volume and on his podcast and the way he talked about it, because I was curious how he was going to frame this, because I think most of us are going to look at this and say, all right, it's amounted to about a 14-game suspension. It was labeled an indefinite suspension before that. He's back with the team ramping up to play. And most people are going to rightly look at that, kind of the way that we looked at the Ja Morant suspension and go, how much are you really going to change in a few weeks' time? And he was the first one to say that in the video is, I understand it's not done. Like, I have to keep doing this stuff and keep reframing my relationship with this. And he said, without any qualifiers, I was wrong in the way that I acted in the situation with Nurkic. I was wrong in the situation in the way I acted in the Rudy Gobert incident. So he came out and did take responsibility for those moments and say that he was wrong, which is about all you can ask for.
Well, and oh, by the way, he did get an extension with the volume, which is owned by Colin Cowherd, the podcast place, where he got an extension there. So listen, that's been great. He's been, current players having their own podcast is certainly the thing right now. Mike, as far as, and listen, having to talk to people, or if you feel somebody has an anger problem or whatever problem, and having them talk to somebody certainly can be a good thing, and I understand that. But I'll also say this, because I know that this isn't the only era of, if you get in trouble, you maybe have to talk to people before you have to come back. And players, while it certainly could help some players, are going to say and do whatever they need to do to get back on the court, to get back on the field, to get back on the ice. They're going to say all the right words, and then we end up saying talk is cheap, actions are louder than words. And they're going to say, you got to go to counseling. Okay, I'll go to counseling. Yes, I was wrong. Woe is me. I'm so sorry for that. I'm going to change. And as I said, I don't want to completely discount it. It will help some. Some will realize they do have a problem. But to parse through that, guys want to get back on their field of play. And if they know they're not, and they're not getting paid until they do this, well, then they're going to do those things the way the league wants them to be done so they can get back on the court or the ice or the field or whatever. So I have never really been a big fan of the indefinite suspension and wait till you do all you're supposed to do, because players, for the most part, are going to do what they need to do as quickly as they can to get back in their field of play. So I'm just more of the structure of having, you have to do this, but still you're going to be out for these amount of games.
Yeah, well, and I think in general, you're right, and a lot of people also look at that from leagues and teams in general, and I think, I'm pretty jaded when it comes to this stuff of saying they present a pretty low bar to clear and usually obscure it. Like, usually we hear about, there are going to be certain parameters in the return to play that are necessary, the conditions that have to be met, and they talked about counseling as one of those. I think there were some group meetings done with Green's agent, the Warriors GM, some other people involved as well. In general, in a lot of these instances, Dad, we hear about the structure and the parameters and the beginning, but then we never hear specifics about it after the fact. We never hear, well, what did you actually learn through this process? And that's the one thing I will say for Draymond is in this video, he does talk about reframing the way he looks at someone like Kevin Durant, insinuating that he needs help and how he once thought about that and the ways he feels like he's grown and changed over the years. So I think you are right that in general, the way these things are all framed is usually, hey, we're going to, from the team and league side, just do enough to make it look good for PR publicly. And from the player side, I'm going to appease my bosses so I can get back out there and do the thing. And for Draymond, he talked about this as well, and we've always said it. He's a guy who's lived on the edge, who flirts with the line, and it has gotten him all of his wildest dreams in his entire life. And so that's going to be the real test, Dad, is will Draymond actually work in what he might believe in his heart of heart is against his best interest to be the instigator out there on the court the way he has been for this team and the dynastic run that they went through. We are going to have plenty of opportunities because this season was littered with Draymond Green stepping over that line. And now we're going to see if in the midst of a season that, by the way, isn't going great. Like, it's not like he's walking back into a Golden State locker room where everything's hunky-dory and they're going to go out there and blow everyone's doors off. There are going to be hard days, and they're going to get Draymond's stress test before this is all said and done.
I mean, let's be honest. A guy who straddles the line, and you mentioned it, as I have said, love him on my team, hate playing against him. He's one of those guys, right? You'd love him as a teammate, but, and you'd hate to play against him because of what may happen. He's a line straddler, and if you're a line straddler, occasionally you're still going to cross the line. He's going to. To think he's going to come back and never get a technical again or never do something again that may warrant another suspension is fool's gold. This is the way he plays. And I'm not saying that in a negative way because you're all grown men who are playing this game. You have to figure out what you need to do to stay on the court. And live your wildest dreams, right? And for him, it's a combination of being, a good player and also being that instigator, that tough guy, that guy that's going to get the tee, that guy that's going to get suspended. That's a role that he plays. So it's not all of a sudden going to go away. The problem is it can hurt your team, but when you're a good enough player, that's sometimes things you have to accept, knowing that I don't want to tame this guy too much or I lose what he does on the court. And you don't want to lose that from Draymond Green because that's some of the power of his game. It's a tough situation to be in.
It is, but everyone also understands where the lines are. Like, Draymond is not the only passionate person who gets through his NBA career off willing himself to be better based on attitude, and plenty of those people don't kick people in the nuts or choke anyone out on the court repeatedly. So I think there's plenty of people that understand, he's more than capable of playing right up to the edge but not going over, because we've seen plenty of people do it in the past. I think one other interesting corollary of this is he mentioned a conversation he had with Steve Kerr, where Steve Kerr came over to his house and Steve said, you got to end this the right way, and right now you're not. And this is now the second member of the big three that we've seen associated with the conversation about the end. We saw Klay Thompson pretty candid about this in a press conference the other day, where he mentioned kind of looking back on all he's been able to accomplish and wanting to end the right way with his attitude and energy. There is a real feeling of finality around this Golden State core that we've seen.
I think we have both already said, because especially the Klay Thompson situation, that these three, this is going to be the last year they're together, and who knows if they'll even get in the playoffs.
It's wild to think about. We did try and heap dirt on them a while back, and then they won a championship in our face, so you can never fully rule it out, but the vibes have seemed off around there for a while. We will see if Draymond is back and better for it once he hits the court soon. All right, guys, time to finish off the show where we always do. This, that, the third, 3 quick stories. Send you off on into the rest of your day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live if you can, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Tell people we are here. We get questions all the time. We appreciate everyone inquiring. We are 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern live on the DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and soon to be more places in your lap. And if you miss any of that or our great guests like our buddy Jason Fitz, college football and NFL analyst and reporter for Yahoo Sports and Fox Sports Radio, you can check that out wherever you get your podcasts or available here on the YouTube right after we get done with the show. Let's get to this, guys. We had the Golden Globes going on the other night, and this was an interesting scene after that I think speaks to all of our sensibilities. Paul Giamatti, the star of The Holdovers, who won an award for Best Actor in a Comedy, was seen in his tux at an In-N-Out Burger in Westwood, California, with his globe on the table, slugging burgers and fries after leaving the Beverly Hills press room. So, Dad, I'd imagine this is more of the after party that you'd be inclined for after winning an award like this.
Big Paul Giamatti fan, by the way. Also in Billions, a series that I've watched, and certainly plenty of other things. I'm a big fan of his acting. This is we love this, right? Like the Stanley Cup, every player gets it for a day. Where does it end up? Where do these trophies or awards end up? Where do you go with them? Sometimes they end up at the bottom of the pool, or some great stories around them. But yeah, this would be it right here for me. I would have no problem because I'm an In-N-Out fan. Taking any award and going to just have a burger. Instead of going to these fancy schmancy after parties, man, go to In-N-Out, get yourself, a burger, get yourself shake, some fries, get them animal style if you so choose, and just enjoy that for a nice, half hour, 45 minutes. Just chill there.
Yeah, while I think In-N-Out Burger is overhyped, I appreciate the sentiment here. And I'd imagine if you're Paul Giamatti, you don't have to wait in the absurd lines that usually accompany every In-N-Out Burger trip for some ungodly reason. So congratulations. I will say, too, what was your response to that?
I was going to say, I'm amazed now. People are getting lazier and lazier because the lines out here at In-N-Out Burger for the drive-thru are massive. If you just go in and park between these lines they have as a parking spot and go in, you're out in 5 minutes. The line inside is nothing compared to the line outside, but nobody wants to get out of their car for 5 to 10 minutes and go get the food and bring it back to the car. They'd rather sit in a line for a half hour. I don't understand it.
I hope people keep doing that because it's provided a great life hack for me.
True.
I do that almost everywhere. I almost never go through the drive-through line because it's almost never faster than just getting out and going inside. I get a little bathroom trip out of it, get to stretch my legs. It's a big win. The other thing I will say about this is Golden Globe, very durable trophy, so you can do this. We're coming off the national championship in college football. I have to say, the college football playoff committee should be ashamed of themselves for instituting the trophy that they did and getting rid of the crystal ball. The crystal ball was one of the greatest trophies in the history of sport. It was beautiful. It was incredibly fragile and always made me scared when people would hold it, but it was a gorgeous testament to the sport. And the fact that they did away with it in the name for that golden monstrosity is a farce.
Yeah, it's a horrible trophy right now. Horrible. Great meaning. Obviously, you want to hold it because of the meaning behind it. But yes, from an aesthetic view of it, what it looks like, it's horrible. Completely agree.
Yeah, we used to be a proper country with a proper trophy for our best college football team. The Wolverines should have had the chance to hold that trophy, and instead they are given the gold. Jesse, let's get to that. Big news yesterday. We had all heard rumblings about this for a while, but Tiger Woods and Nike now officially parting ways.
Yeah, after 27 years, they announced on Monday that partnership had ended. We'd heard whispers about it. A statement came out. Tiger said, "The days since have been filled with so many amazing moments and memories. If I started naming them, I could go on forever." Guys, hard to think of a more iconic partnership than the one between Nike and Tiger Woods. And I keep reading all these headlines that are saying, like, he hinted at a second chapter. And it's like, he didn't hint. He said, for those of you who are asking, yes, there's a second chapter. See you in LA. So we'll see what that is. But he didn't hint at anything. He said, yeah, brother, there's a second chapter.
Yeah, do we think he's doing this without something else ready to go?
Yeah, come on.
I mean, come on. I mean, remember, he signed the richest athlete deal when he got out of Stanford, right? He signed with Nike for a reported $40 million. It was the richest endorsement deal for a professional athlete at the time, which seems like chump change now, which is true in a lot of things. The latest extension and last one he signed with them was in 2013 for $200 million over 10 years, and he'll be making money off them forever, just like Michael Jordan is. But, he was wearing FootJoys at the first tournament he played at this year. And remember, Nike for a while tried to make clubs, which didn't work out at all. They're great at the wearable, the clothing, but as far as the equipment, it was awful. So yeah, there's no doubt there's another chapter that's going to include millions and millions and millions of dollars for Tiger Woods.
Yeah, somehow I think it's going to work out pretty well for him there. I will say I'm going to miss the commercials because that's the one thing I thought Nike always did incredibly well, especially with Tiger Woods and all the accomplishments that he had, was the commercials that they made about him there. And so I am nothing if not a child of capitalism, and I will miss the advertisements designed to get me to buy more Nike stuff as this partnership ends there. We'll wait and see what happens, but like we said, somehow I imagine Tiger is going to be okay. From one of the most notable athletes to Jesse, a great reminder of how anonymous helmet sports players can be sometimes. Let's get to the third.
Yeah, so let's go on out to Green Bay. Emily Roberts of WBay TV was doing a report on Packers fans traveling to Dallas for Sunday's NFC wildcard game against the Cowboys. She's mid-sentence talking about how fans would bring that energy to Texas, and then all of a sudden Jair Alexander hops in the shot, brings some extra energy of his own.
And I'm sure they'll bring that energy right to Texas.
I'm just here to tell you, Pack is back.
You heard it from a fan right here. Pack is back. Tickets to Sunday's game range from close to $200 all the way up to thousands of dollars on Ticketmaster. So we'll see what the representation looks like over in Dallas.
I mean, she thought he was just an excited fan popping in. And to be fair, she's in the middle of a live shot.
Yes.
She looked over for a second. I mean, of course she didn't register who it was.
Yeah, I was going to say, shout out to Emily for maintaining her composure and finishing the hit. People that work in local news especially are so accustomed to probably going out and setting that shot up by herself. You're basically exposed to whoever's going to be around there. She was right out in front of Lambeau, and so you're glad there that she just saw that, absorbed it into the thing, and kept the hit moving. It just happened to be very funny for the rest of us, especially in light of the fact that Dad Jair Alexander crashing the party in places he's supposed to be has kind of been a theme for his life lately.
Yeah, it cost him a game because he crashed the captain's coin toss a few games ago and cost him a game. Yeah, I'm not blaming her one bit. For a split second, she looks at this guy jumping into her shot, and he says what he says. She's kind of looking at him in the camera. I don't blame her a bit. And this goes to show again This is a sport where you wear helmets. And now the superstars are noticed where they are. And Jair Alexander he's paid the richest cornerback. It's not like he isn't paid well, and he's a great player in this league. Don't get me wrong. But you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the big-time quarterbacks or wide receivers or running backs, players like that, or big-time defensive, pass rushers or something. Really the superstars that you see all the time. If it's not one of them, it's tough to be recognized, especially in a quick scenario like that, to know exactly what they look like because you know them with their helmet on.
I will say, the guy has beautiful eyes.
Gorgeous.
I mean, Jeff Saturday striking. I always said when Jeff Saturday was at the podium during that coaching stint, I don't know how people ask a question. You can get lost in those baby blues so easy. And Jair Alexander, it's a crime that he put sunglasses on, quite frankly, out there, depriving the rest of the world of those papers. So shout out to Emily for making that happen. Shout out to Jair Alexander for doing it in a place that now won't get him suspended for barging in and offering up his opinions at a spot that's outside. That's growth. We talked about Draymond Green growing a little bit today. Jair Alexander, he sat down for that 1-game suspension. He looked at his actions, and he decided, I'm going to go out here and do the exact same thing. If you have learned something from the suspension that is this show for the day, that wouldn't work. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.